Get Pucked. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. As you might see if you're watching from YouTube, we have a different face on the podcast today. Dave unfortunately couldn't make it, but we're very happy to announce that the newest member of the Get Pucked podcast joins us for his first time with us. We have none other than Gregory Hamel. How are you, Greg?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, thanks for joining us.
NHL.
Yeah, so where might you know Greg from? Well, it just so happens that if you're plugged into anything related to Habs sort of happenings in the past couple of weeks, you might have come across his very, I will say, viral video that he made, a little hype video, and not there long after, another one about Demidov, which I think even got some love from the man himself, albeit temporarily, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So we're super psyched to have you, man. Thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully we're gonna make some magic happen here.
Welcome to the Get Pucked team.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Oh, man. All right. So, because it's the first time we got Greg here, I guess I'll fire off the question, and Greg, we're gonna have you answer right off the bat. We'll get your take right away. You may have seen, you may not have seen, I think you might have seen, and many people have, the NHL.com has posted what they have as their projected lineup for the Habs for the next season. It has raised some eyebrows about several points. I'm going to name them. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you go to NHL.com to go find it, or on Habs subreddit, or on Twitter. You'll probably catch it. But right off the bat, here is the projected lineup from NHL.com. You got Slafkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield. I'm naming them left to right as I see them. You got Newhook, Kirby Dach, Josh Anderson. You got Joel Armia, Evans, Gallagher, and then Pezzetta, Dvorak, RHP. Your defense: Mike Matheson, David Savard, Caden Gooley, Justin Barron, Jack-Eye, and Harris, with Monty and Primo as your goalies. So, Greg.
I mean, they got the goalies right.
They got the goalies right. Yeah, we think they got the goalies right. Please tell me your take on this lineup.
I mean, I like you said, I don't have it like right now in front of me, but right off the bat, I think Joshua Roy is kind of a lock with how he looked last season, and unless he plays like very bad in the training camp, I still think he has to earn a spot. I don't think anything is given to him, but I think if he has a decent camp, there's a very good chance that he's gonna even contend for a top 6 spot. Like I said, like we've talked about, I think he could be a good fit on that second line. So to not have him in the lineup at all is kind of surprising to me. Honestly, though, to be fair, I'd rather probably have him play 20 minutes in with the Rocket than fourth line minutes with Montreal, if that's what's only available to him. So if we make a trade or whatever, or prefer to play Josh Anderson over him or Gallagher or whatever, maybe that's an option. But right off the bat, that's kind of what bothers me a little bit about the forward core. And then defense, I mean, I think many people would like to see Mailloux and Hutson crack the lineup. I think nothing's going to be given to them either. I think it's going to rely on how they look in camp. Right now, Jack-Eye and Barron still don't have contracts. I think Jack-Eye's, it's a matter of time. But Barron, I'm not sure. I mean, Barron, I just don't know if he's the long-term plans of the organization. I mean, with Matheson already playing power play minutes, and then Hutson coming in soon. If it's not at the start of the year, he's going to get looks, obviously, over the next few months. So I just don't think he's going to get that spot on a power play, which I think he's where he should thrive and all. So I think I just think Barron maybe in the top 4 is not optimal, but other than that, I think it's very hard to predict right now what the lineup is going to look like. But my projected lineup would look slightly different, I think.
Well done, sir. Great first answer. Vito, bring us back down to earth.
It's almost like the NHL.com just grabbed the highest paid players and just made their lineups. They didn't base themselves on anything that they know about the Montreal Canadiens, anything that they would know about the potential players and the younger players that could crack the lineup or anything like that. I do see Joshua Roy in a spot there for him. I'd see him more starting this season on the third line, and if he continues that momentum before he got hurt, I could see him taking over on the second line. Especially if you look at the way Josh Anderson was last year, he was bouncing all over the lineup. He started on the first, went down to the second, eventually got to the third. Sometimes he played fourth line minutes, depending, and he was all over the place. We know that it was a bad season for Josh Anderson. But I even hearing David Savard on the first pairing. I mean, David Savard has never really been a first pairing guy. I see him more on the second pairing, maybe playing with somebody like Jack-Eye. That you saw there was moments there where even last season when they did get paired up together, that defensively they were sound. It was more stable. Jack-Eye felt a little like he had somebody there too, and they played more of a shutdown role for the few games that they played that way. I just don't see David Savard and Matheson being paired as a first pairing. I would see it more them going with Gooley and probably playing him on his off position again, which is a mistake to me, but I could see that happening more than anything else. And as for
who's your pairings? Like if David Savard is not on your top pairing, and so Matheson is,
David Savard should be on the second because he's right hand shot.
Yeah,
would be on the second pairing.
Who plays with Matheson first line on the first?
It would be Gooley on his offhand again. I think they start the season that way again. It's a mistake, but I think that's what they would do. I really do think that. And while I do think that there should be a spot open or available for somebody like Mailloux, Reinbacher could play in Laval, and Lane Hutson, they're to what Greg said, it's not given to them. It's going to be it'll depend on what they do in training camp. It'll depend whether they make any trades beforehand. Barron is still there, and you've already heard his name in the rumor mill the last few months and whatnot. He could be thrown in a trade, but I feel like Montreal wouldn't mind keeping him either. It all depends how things play out. There are teams against the cap and way above the cap that Montreal could probably negotiate with and make a deal happen. However, if we're working with just the lineups today, I think NHL.com just based themselves on the highest paid players and made a roster out of it.
So I'll say that, and I mean, I don't necessarily know who wrote this, and with all due respect to the person who wrote it, I think it's pretty lazy. Like, to your point, I think they just looked at players that were on their contract that aren't necessarily rookies, and they just slapped them on paper. Yeah. When you make a projected lineup, you have to take some sort of assumptions, some sort of liberties, and suggest that the lineup that you're going to see is the lineup that's going to happen after training camp. And again, those assumptions are that some guys are going to ascend and they're going to make this team, and it's going to bump some of these other guys out. Now, we know already, I know it's, late July and whatever, but RHP is already hurt. He did some charity game and he got hurt. So he might not even be there to start the season for all we know, right? Pezzetta was rotating in as the 13th forward all season long too. So how you have this top 12 and you don't have a guy like Joshua who is like a legitimate player. He didn't look out of place at all.
But Matt, if you look at the roster, the projected lineup, what rookie is there? They just base themselves on cemented contracted players.
But that's what I'm saying. And
it's a lazy article. And if you actually go and like when those projected lineups were coming out, there were other fans from other teams that were saying, "What the heck is this article?" It's almost as though the writer just made an article to make an article.
Well, I think they were doing this for every team. To be fair, I don't think this was uniquely for the Canadiens. But I just look at this and I can't understand how you don't have Joshua in your top 12. And to your point, Greg, I agree. If you're going to put him on the fourth line, I'd rather him play in the NHL, the AHL, 100%. This kid is a top 6 style player. If he's going to be an NHL player, that's where he's going to play. You could probably see him on the third line too. Probably can get well there, depending on the makeup of that lineup. But in general, that's where he should be. Now, Josh Anderson on your top 6. Is this Josh Anderson last year? Or is this Josh Anderson who's coming back for a revenge tour? Yet to be seen. But when you're putting it on paper for the start of next season, you got to base with what just happened. And good God, you can't have him on your top 6. It just doesn't make any sense. And then your defense.
But I could see them starting him on the top 6. I could see him starting, especially like you have Doc, you have him, you have Newhook. You could see kind of where the logic sets in that he's somebody that could create space, especially off the rush or along the boards. crash the net. If he plays Josh Anderson playoff style, then yes, he's gonna play in the top 6. If he plays Josh Anderson like last year, where he had flashes and was able to do the same thing, but it was always very predictive, and his game was very predictive, then no, it's not gonna work.
Put the top 12 aside for the second, because I think the most egregious is the defense. I mean, Justin Barron being there on this projected lineup is wild. I hope he makes a resurgence. I hope he taps into what he needs to tap into. But to have him there instead of Lane Hutson, who in a very small sample size at the end of last season showed that he belonged, and you'll see it through camp again. And I have nothing but faith that this kid is going to be there, if not right away, very, very soon thereafter. Even Mailloux, who was an AHL All-Star last year and showed a lot of potential. In a season where you're looking to progress but not necessarily be a contender, why you don't bring him up to the next level and see if he's ready to take the next step? For a guy who looked very, very shaky when he was called up, that blows my mind. Jordan Harris as well. I don't think he's a lock. I thought he was okay, but to have him as a lock and not have somebody else there tentatively, I'm surprised.
Experience, Matt.
Well, that's it, and that's what the whole lineup's about. So now I'll throw three names at you guys that don't necessarily have NHL experience, and you tell me which one of these three, if you think, if any, should merit a spot on that opening night roster. Okay, and it's three obvious ones. You got Mailloux, you got Hutson, and Reinbacher. Do you see any of these three guys starting with the Canadiens at first puck drop of game one? Greg.
Like it's very hard to say, because like we've mentioned, like you can't predict how they're going to look in camp, how they're going to look in preseason games. I think there could be a spot open, and like I've said, like I think Harris long term might be the perfect seventh guy, like the guy you sub in when there's an injury and all that, or you want to shake things up. And Byron is kind of not the same kind of player, but I think could fill the same kind of role. As you need offense. Your second quarterback power play is out with an injury or whatever. You can sub him in, kind of like a Chris Weinman, but probably a little bit better, but like a second unit power play guy. So those guys, I have no problem having them as seven defensemen. But the thing is, you can't have two seventh defensemen. Like one of them has to go through waivers or whatever to go back to Laval. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a spot open for one of the three. I don't think Reinbacher is going to start in Montreal, to be honest with you, unless he has like a crazy camp. But I agree. I think one of Mailloux or Hutson, probably, well, the one that stands out the most during the training camp and preseason games, it might force the hand of the coach and organization and start with a trial in the NHL.
So these are very safe answers you're giving me. These are very diplomatic answers you're giving me. I want a bold prediction. Put your name down. Give me one guy who you think is going to be there. Who's making it?
I'll go Hutson, but
all right.
I'll go Hutson. Just he's got something that other defensemen don't bring, but I also. I think the fact that Mailloux is right-handed is also like very advantageous to him as well.
Yes.
So
Sir.
I'll go Hutson just because he brings something totally different that even Matheson doesn't really is capable of bringing with just his speed, his agility, and all that. Just a mix of crazy like skills and all that. That Mailloux, like, he is skilled obviously, but not quite at that level. And so I'll go Hutson, but like I said, it's 50-50 a little bit.
Okay. We got a Hutson, tentatively. Vito?
So I think it's his spot to lose, but I'm going to go with Mailloux. He's right-handed. He's a right-hand shot. Montreal's lacking depth on the right-hand side. Barron is almost a lock. It's the only way I could explain what NHL.com did there. You almost think he's a lock because he's a right-handed shot, and he's mobile and whatnot. So and then when you look at it, even if Gouli is playing on his offhand, that means there's only two right-hand shot defensemen that are going to be part of the active roster. So I could see somebody like Lane Hutson and Reinbacher for sure, starting in Laval, and get his confidence up and continue his progression once he got to Laval last year and whatnot. And I could see Lane Hutson being the guy that says, hey, they go and send him down and Laval play for top 4 minutes to start and eventually become a first pairing guy, kind of like Mailloux did. Because at the end of the day, when I look at the numbers, Mailloux last year with Laval had a great season at 47 points and 72 games with Laval. I mean, if you're one of those people that follows plus minus, his plus minus wasn't fantastic. So he might need to work on the defensive game a little bit. But if you pair him with somebody who's a little bit more defensively responsible and they use him as a second power play quarterback kind of guy and utilize his size properly, then I think Mailloux could be the guy that starts with the Montreal Canadiens next season. I really, really do. It's going to be to what Greg said too. The fact that he's right hand shot is a huge advantage for him because Lane Hutson's a left-handed shot. Lane Hutson's his ceiling is higher than Mailloux and the players that we're talking about in terms of his offensive potential. But there's so many left-handed defensemen right now who can play in the NHL and that are kind of like vets at this point that it's hard to say that you're going to displace them right now. I do think that when Matheson or some people, if you look at some other popular Twitter handles are now making bold predictions thinking that Goulie's gone before the season starts. If a left-handed defenseman is moved out, then you might see Lane Hutson just staying with the roster.
I think about it in this way. I'm going to cheat a little bit.
You're allowed to cheat, but you give Greg a hard time.
I just a bit, just a touch. Hear me out. I think it's Hutson. I think to your point, Vito, I think it's his spot to lose. I think his pedigree coming in and what he showed at the NHL level, albeit again in garbage games at the end of the season, if he maintains that level of play throughout the preseason, I think he's in.
But I never said Hutson was his position.
I know he did. I'm cheating by saying I think it's going to be both of them. I think Mailloux gets the call up not too long after, and I think you see both of them up there in some capacity, some way, shape, or form. I think that opening night, it'll just be Hutson, and Mailloux will stay in the AHL to start with, but then he's coming up very, very soon after.
Look, I see they just traded a right-handed defenseman in Kovacevic. They got a 4th-round pick, so
hold on
the right-hand side.
Hold on. Let me just stop you 2 seconds and just say this for what it's worth. I'm not a giant believer of this whole left-hand, right-hand shot thing. I put a little bit of stock in it. I think if you have a guy and he plays on the side he's more comfortable with, you should try to do the best you can to accommodate. But I don't care.
You're not entirely wrong.
You're
not entirely wrong. However, there are some defensemen that are capable of playing left and right, and there's some that are not capable of playing left or right, or they're offhand. For example, David Savard. No matter where he's went, for the most part, he's played right hand because when you put him on the left, he looks like Emelin, who it didn't work when you put Emelin on the right. He just doesn't work. There's some players who can't do it. And then there's some players that are versatile enough that will figure it out. Harris is one of those guys that has been playing left and right and bouncing around between both. Goulie last season, we saw it. Jacky did it, and when he first started out and was placed on the right, he struggled at first and then started to slowly figure it out. But they quickly realized he is much stronger on the left than he is on the right. So I wouldn't necessarily say that you can just give me the best defensemen and plug them in whatever position. You want them to be successful.
I want them to be successful, but at the same time, I want to see what it looks like with the 6 best and move them around amongst themselves. That's the ideal. That would be my ideal. And if it's only Hutson, then it's only Hutson. I mean, that's fine too. But out of the 3 of them, I think it's Hutson that has the better chance to start on the team out of camp than the other ones. I think Reinbacher, they're really going to take their time with, even though he might have the overall greatest natural talent potentially. But I think they're going to take their time with him.
Let me ask you guys both a question. Out of all the potential defensemen, the young ones that could probably crack the lineup, so I mean, it's the 3 we've mentioned. We're going to throw in Barron there. Who's actually, from a talent and skill perspective, your favorite?
Yeah, it's not going to be Barron. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to go with Barron.
And I also think that they're not the same thing you're asking. Who's my favorite, or who do I think has the greatest talent?
No, greatest talent we know who has the best offensive abilities and ceiling. It's Hutson. Who's your favorite? Like when you're looking at the all-around package and what they could potentially become within 3 to 5 years from now.
I think personally, I'd go Hutson. To be honest, it might be unpopular, and it's not a shot at Reinbacher because I think he's going to be solid too. But I'm still going with the fact that there are so few defensemen in the NHL that can be elite at what Hutson could become elite at. You look at Quinn Hughes, Kel McCarr, Fox. There are very few names and just an all around very good two-way defenseman. It's not easy to find, but it's easier to find in my opinion. And so I think it adds a lot of value to Lane Hutson as a prospect and as a whole. Yeah.
Does the size concern you at all?
Yeah, obviously, but I think it's very small sample size. But from what we've seen so far at the NHL level in 2 games, which I think Detroit, it was do or die for them. So I think we might be underrating a little bit of those 2 games because to them it were playoff games. So I think they were playing an intense game at all. I think he didn't look out of place physically, and in the World Juniors playing against tough guys and even the NCAA playing guys a little bit older and a little bit bigger, he never looked completely out of space because he learned how to handle he learned how to play with his size and take advantage of it. So I think he's going to be capable of adapting in the NHL too.
It's the only thing I'll say why it's in the offensive zone. It's that shiftiness. You never really know what he's going to do with Hutson. Like all of a sudden, you think he's going one direction and he can just turn on the dime. That's where he is. That's his strength at the blue line.
I thought you would maybe get more shy at the NHL level, and then in his first shift, he on his second shift, he shimmies at the blue line and does whatever he wants. Even in the third period of a tie game in Montreal in his last game, dangling like Sherratt and Patrick Kane and all that, doing what he wants. I think it just shows how confident he is, and that's just a lot of value to me.
I also think that the coaching staff that they have right now, the Montreal Canadiens, allows him to do that because previous coaching staffs would have benched him probably for doing that stuff. Matthew,
I'll say this much. The most hype I am is about Hutson for the reasons Greg mentioned. I think that he could be a game breaker, a power play quarterback that the team has been desperate for since Markov. I think he could be ecstatic. Am I concerned about his size? I am a little bit. Give me 82 seasons of big boys beating the hell out of him.
82 games.
Or 82 games, rather, not 82 seasons, 82 games. And if he's still fine at the end of that, my fear will go away. But it is what it is. Size is size. Caulfield has been okay out there. He's a smaller guy too. He seems to be doing very well. It's still definitely doable. That being said, I don't know and I don't watch junior players. I go based on the information I'm given. The scouting reports that come from the professionals, all that kind of stuff. So if you ask me, I have to assume, given where they were drafted, it's Reinbacher. I think Reinbacher technically has the most talent as a defenseman. Package, total. Not offensive.
I love Greg's face when you said that. It was like,
I think he has an offense element to his game, but I think from a defensive perspective, I think this guy could be a defensive stalwart. I think you need guys like this on your team to have a successful team in the long run. He's drafted 5th overall. Lane Hutson was drafted in the 2nd round. With all due respect, he might have been a steal. We might look back on it, but you had many, many teams that had the opportunity to take him much higher and they didn't for all the different kind of reasons. Now, again, please prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong. Please put him out there. Let him be the next Quinn Hughes. Let him be the next McCarr. A dance all day, every day. Fantastic. But when I look at it and I look at these guys and Mailloux as well and Barron for the same token, when we talk about it, draft position, pedigree, hype behind them, the hype about Lane Hutson was enormous. Enormous. Everybody who's anybody was looking at this kid, looking at what he was doing on the national stage and all this kind of stuff, and it was there. And it's fantastic. But it was always, can it translate to the NHL? Can he do what he's doing to these guys, to NHL caliber players? We saw 2 games. Let me see the season. I reserve the right to come back. I am super pumped and super hyped about Lane Hutson. However, You have a defenseman that in these 4 that you gave me that was drafted 5th overall. He is 18 years old. We know nothing about him. None of us. I'm looking at all of us here. We really don't know any. You didn't watch any of his games over in Austria. You didn't see any of his style of play. You might have saw clips here and there. We don't know nothing. We have to trust in the process. We have to trust in where they're drafted.
Greg watched.
I'm sure whatever he's seen of Reinbacher has been in clips and has been in packages. He's never watched a live game. Have you watched a live game? Maybe I should
Well, first off, yes. But second of all, I think
wow.
The second of all, I think, even if you didn't fully watch all his games in Europe, because I think I just only watched 2 because I streamed
2 more than Matt did, Greg.
It is 2 more than me. It is 2 more than me.
You can base, an opinion almost as just as precise on the 11 games that he played in Laval in the North American style than the 30 games or whatever that he played in Germany, I believe, in the NLA. It's completely different style. And even if you didn't watch him, and despite his draft position and all, I think the 11 games or 12 games he played in Laval are more telling than, the kind of play, how he played in a terrible team in the NLA with Clauden. And
so you're kind of you're backing my point. You're saying that he could be better than what he's shown, and that
I was just saying that even if you didn't watch him in Europe, I think you can base an opinion on how he played in North America, which is even a better way to kind of scout prospect or young players.
Okay, I get what you're saying. So even in that capacity, I'll admit I haven't watched full Laval Rocket games personally. I have seen a lot more of them, however, than I did of any of the teams that he played for when he was in Europe, especially that terrible team. That said, I still think the sample size is way too low for me to make a really informed opinion about it. I have liked what I saw. I liked that he got in and right away he was very much comfortable. It seemed right off the bat. And again, I'm putting my faith into the scouting department of the Montreal Canadiens, who saw an entire draft of players and decided with the 5th overall pick to take this defenseman in an offensive draft. So I'm just basing it on that opinion alone. I think he has the highest ceiling. I think
I'm excited. I'm excited for seeing them as a future pairing. That's what I'm excited for.
I'm excited for all of it. Don't get me wrong. Your question was which of the one? Yeah.
Hutson and Reinbacher. Okay, so I'll put it this way: the guy who gets you up off your seat, or could potentially get you off your seat as a fan,
well, it's Hutson.
It's Hutson, right?
Yeah, that's easy.
But I think that Reinbacher can develop as the player that'll help you get through the playoffs. He'll be that stable guy. He could be that Pietrangelo, Devin Taves-esque type of guy who's going to be offensively productive, but will also be super, super stable on the back end. And somebody that you can rely on that can lead to 24 minutes a night. And if they go to double overtime or whatever, would be the guy that they rely on for that, the penalty kill. I just think he's got that aspect of his game. And he happens to be also right-handed, which is a huge, huge bonus in the league.
Yeah.
That he's a guy that in a few years from now, everyone's going to be looking and say, okay, we understand why they chose him and why they drafted him.
What I'm going to say is first off, for the draft ranking stuff, I think you can't really base an opinion on that.
It's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
But where did it come from? Okay, I understand what you're saying, but they must have done the research. These guys are professionals. It's their jobs.
You can't base an opinion on that, because I could name 1,000, but draft positions, Tyler Boucher was drafted before Wyatt Johnston in 2021. Draft position doesn't define at all how a player is going to play.
Absolutely, but
hey, you started Kotkaniemi.
But can you not assume? Hey guys, there are misses left, right, and center. But at the end of the day, from a player that we know very little about, and you putting him against guys that we know a bit about, and we're just speculating future. Our hopes are that they all hit, and this becomes a wonderful thing. They're all great, and who knows what's going to happen. But if you ask me now, I have to think that a kid drafted 5th overall possesses the raw materials at a higher level than the other guys. you're right. Hutson's style of game is going to make me more
Right, hold
excited
on,
than
hold on.
Reinbacher's style of game.
Let me defend Hutson for a second because he should have gone in the first round.
But he didn't.
It's because of his size he got passed over.
I
and
don't care the reasons.
A lot of teams didn't do look at the medical reports.
And I'm ecstatic as well. And he grew a little bit, and I'm happy.
The leader in points this year was drafted in 58. I think Hutson was 62nd. So draft rankings, truly, there's a reason Kucherov went in the second round, and there's a reason Hutson went in the second round. It's not the same reason.
I hope it ends up being the same thing, by the way. I hope where Kucherov is in his career, Hutson gets to a similar place. Yeah.
And I'm just going to say as well, to defend Hutson, you can't overlook his style of play and how valuable it is, because you mentioned like Reinbacher being something like Pietrangelo. Pietrangelo was once made available in free agency. You can pick up those kind of players more easily. Pietrangelo, a few years ago, went to Vegas. I mean, Brendan Monto is not quite, the most elite two-way guy, but this year he was made available. He wasn't re-signed. Quinn Hughes, Adam Fox, Kel McCarr, those offensive dynamos don't get to free agency. They don't want to get rid of them because there's so few of them. And I'm not saying Hutson is going to be one of them, but I'm saying that if he hits the ceiling and that he gets there, he's going to be a much more valuable. Just
okay. Hold on. So that last bit. But hold on a second. That last bit is fascinating. So are you suggesting that Lane Hutson's ceiling, that he might not reach, but his ceiling can be Cale McCarr, Quinn Hughes, and Adam Fox?
I wouldn't say that he's going to be as defensively dominant, but I'm going to say in terms of offense, he can put up similar numbers if he's playing on a similar kind of team, which is like Colorado, Canucks with Rangers with 100.
The right supports.
Yeah, okay. In the same setting, I think all things being equal, you think his offensive talent is as good.
He could put up more points than any defenseman, more than Subban, more than we've seen in a while for the Canadiens. And so I think if both hit their ceiling, and I'm not saying Hutson is going to be McCarr, I'm not saying he's going to be any of those guys, but I think he has the potential to be close to these kind of guys defensively. And if they both hit, and Hutson becomes a Walmart version of McCarr, and then Reinbacher even becomes Pietrangelo, I think Hutson is still more valuable because of how rare it is that you get a player that plays that.
Okay. So
I just want to say something about the Pietrangelo comparison. Okay, those are comparable stylistically from a lot of sites and whatnot. However, to your point, Pietrangelo chose his destination. St. Louis didn't want him to go to free agency. He chose to say, "I want to go to Vegas." So there's.
I guess, but just in general, those top defensemen are still easier to find in my opinion than guys defensemen that can put up that many points.
It's fair. I mean, it's just the way that the initial question was phrased. I don't want to make it sound like, ooh, I'm crapping on Hutson and you guys are using the word like to defend him. I'm not. I think he's going to start. I think he's further ahead. I think he's more offensively gifted. I think what he's going to give, to Greg's point, is something that is rare for defensemen, and that's why he's so sought after. However, you asked me, who do I think has and possesses the greater talent as a defenseman on total? And I'm putting my faith in the organization, and they drafted this kid at 5. I'm going to back that play and say it's him until it's proved otherwise. And they both, you're talking like it might be this difference. Like that might be it. And again, they're very different defensemen, so it's hard to compare.
They're going to be used in different situations.
100%. But you have to have them.
Yeah, I could see him being more of the penalty kill, shutdown guy who can produce offensively as well, versus you could see Hutson being the guy that's going to be in starting the offensive zone, doing the offensive zone starts, power play, on the 3 in overtime, 3-on-3. I could see that happening. But the best answer and the best response out of everything I just heard was the fact that he said that Greg said that we could have the Walmart version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I'll take it. I'll take it.
I'll take it.
I mean,
take Walmart,
a Walmart version
Makar.
of Cale Makar is still like an elite player. He's going to be like one of the best defensemen in this generation. I don't expect Hutson to be that.
No doubt. I'll take Walmart version of Makar.
Yeah, any day. I'd take him 5th overall. I'd take the Walmart version of Cale Makar 5th overall. So
I would agree. That version, you're still looking at a defenseman who's putting in 70 plus points or something. Yeah, you're taking him. You're taking him all day. You're taking him every day. So that's cool. All right. Thanks for that little question there, Vito. I do have one last little thing I did want to talk about. It's something that's making obviously a little bit of stir again. Michael Pezzetta was on a podcast recently, and they were talking about tax. And he said the quiet part loud and basically said that he loses something like 50-something% of the salary. And he was talking 54. A little bit about 54%. And he's talking about escrow, and he's talking about this and that and all these things. And so we've known about this forever. Fans have talked about this forever. Fans have often used this as a major reason why players don't want to sign here in particular. Canada for the most part, and Quebec even more so because of the tax situation. I'm putting this on the spot. I didn't tell you guys this ahead of time, so I know you're not prepared. Have you heard about this before? Have you talked about this before? And have you come up with anything that you think the NHL can do or should do to even the playing field in that capacity so that certain teams in certain states don't have such a competitive advantage over other places?
Something I had suggested in the past among my friends and whatever when this kind of topic came up was the fact that I think teams in Canada or teams that are high tax states even, they should play at a bit of a higher cap to kind of like make up for the fact that teams like Tampa, Florida, the Californias can offer a player $9 million that would equate to $11 million, let's say, in a give or take, in let's say in Montreal. But at the same time, when I look at it, these players are all paid in US dollars, all of them, and the Canadian dollar is not the strongest dollar in the world. And so players that are living in Canada are getting paid in US, but living under the Canadian currency. So there's that I find that I believe helps mitigate some of the taxes there and can be explained. It's still significant. You're talking about 30, I believe it's like 34% is the exchange, right? So there's ways to mitigate on that. I'm not going to jump on the escrow thing because that's just that too beyond me. So I'm not.
But just to cherry pick that last little bit. I mean, you're assuming these are guys that have families that are staying in the places that they're playing and not living in the States, and they're not like everybody's situation is different. But I don't know if that's it's maybe a part of it, but I don't think that's a huge part. I think you'd rather be in the no tax state than live in Canada and be paid in American.
No kidding, you'd rather be in the no tax state. Yeah. But I'm saying there's ways that kind of mitigate it. Like I don't think Pezzetta. I could be wrong. I'm not an accountant or anything. I don't have my CPA or whatever the case may be. But when you're looking at it, if they stay in Montreal for the most part of the entire season, he's getting paid that, and he's getting paid in U.S. currency. So yeah, he's getting 54%, but is it really 54%? Then there's other ways to mitigate it too. I had heard somebody talk on TSN 690 not long ago where they were saying something along the lines of that when a player goes and play in the U.S., that specific game that he's playing in the U.S., he's taxed whatever that state is. So that the poor accountants that are behind that, the financial gymnastics behind that is nuts.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. I'd have to look into it more. I saw some people debating that actually today, whether or not that's even the way it works or not. But obviously, half your games, no matter what, are at home. Half your games, if we're talking about a player playing for the Montreal Canadiens, are being taxed in Quebec's tax. So, yeah.
So 50% of the games and 50% of their job is in Montreal, and they're paying in US dollars. So let's say it does work that way, then they're getting taxed at 54% for half the games.
Yeah, but it's only a value if they stay here, is the point you're making, right? So the mitigation sort of constraints that you're putting on this is only if they stay. That's where they can try to make some money back because they do the currency conversion and they net more here. Is what you're suggesting. There's
probably other things too. Like I don't know, right? But I know that Kent Hughes was once asked that question and he did admit to it. Yeah, there are some challenges there, but he said it. But there, as a former agent, there's ways to navigate those waters to mitigate it. Is it going to be perfect exactly the way that Tampa and Florida have it? Absolutely not. in Dallas and whatever. But there's ways where it comes a little bit closer, where it doesn't look like anybody who comes to Canada or anybody who's going to a high tax state is getting clobbered the way that it's being described.
So
Because
what I'm hearing,
there's players that want to go to New York. They want to play for the Rangers, and the Rangers are the New York, or whenever you live in New York, just with cost of living and the taxes there too, it's pretty freaking high as well.
so you're suggesting, if I cut through all of it, you're saying there isn't much to do, and there are vehicles in place to kind of level it out for the player itself. And it's not that big of a deal.
There's vehicles to mitigate it. It is a big deal because at the same time, when you do the calculations, there are, I can't remember whose contract they used as a comparison, but I think it might have been Stamkos back in the day when he re-signed with Tampa, and it was rumored that Montreal offered so much money as well, or offered more, or what Radulov rather, and he ended up going to Dallas. Is that when you look at it and how much money he was going to earn, just straightforward, when you looked at it that way, Montreal would have had to pay something like $9 million for Radulov 7. I don't remember exactly what the cap is, but just to give you an example. And there was other accountants and people that knew better, and they're like, yeah, but there's ways to kind of get closer to that number, and yeah, Montreal would have to pay 9, so it gets 9 on the cap, but the player it was up to their agent to kind of work with them to tell them, hey, the salary and all that is not as bad as you think. Yeah, you are going to come out with more money, but if you really wanted to stay in Montreal the way you're talking about, there was ways to kind of fix that up a little bit.
Okay. So from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like you're kind of half. Yes, it's not great, and it is a competitive advantage for the teams, but the other half
I started off
find ways to get around. I
started off that to even the playing field across the NHL. Is I think certain teams, and maybe not everybody's going to agree with me on this, and it's fine, they should operate at a bit of a higher cap to kind of even the playing field. I don't find it right that Tampa could offer a player $9 million while Montreal, Toronto, whatever would have to offer that same player 11 and a half just to even the playing field to make that player feel comfortable. That I don't agree with.
Fair enough. Greg.
Yeah, I mean, what Vito said.
all that stuff.
No, but I'm just gonna say, I'm not sure how to make all that fair, and I don't have concrete solutions. But just from what I've heard and from Gary Bettman's reputation, I don't believe that he worries about it too much. I don't think it's I don't think he sees it that much as a disadvantage or just an important task to fix, I guess.
That's an absolute given. I mean, I agree. I agree with the people who say it's not fair. I do think it's not fair. I don't have a solution. I don't know how much it really, the things that you were kind of alluding to there, Vito, about ways to kind of get around it. Though you shouldn't have to come up with ways to get around it. If you have a contract and the team, any one of the 32 teams offers you a $10 million contract and the other team offers you 8, the 8 team shouldn't, if it's just money, shouldn't necessarily win because you're going to end up with more money there because of a tax situation. You want to go there because you like the town. You want to go there because it's a childhood dream. All the other reasons, fine. That's not my point. My point is if it comes to dollars and it's just dollars and dollars alone, if one team is offering you 10 and the other team is offering you 8, it should just be simple. The team that offered you 10 wants you more, you go to that team. All other things being equal.
There's I know. If you're just talking the dollar amount, but when you look at it, it's I'm going to ask you this question, okay? Put your bias aside about being a Montreal Canadian fan and all that stuff. Would you rather play in Florida and live in Florida or Tampa? We'll say Tampa because their fan base is a little stronger. We'll see what happens with the Florida Panthers now that they won the Cup. But would you rather play in Tampa, Texas, Dallas, the Californias, and have summer and sun all day long, and a cost of living that's a little more, digestible?
You're asking the wrong question. You're asking the wrong question. Ask it backwards. Would I like to play in Tampa if they had 54% tax, or play in Montreal where there's no tax? That's how you should ask it. Because then it becomes about money, and then it's more money or living situation. And then it's fair. I'm sacrificing sunny beaches and living in Florida, if Florida's where you want to be, or whatever. Name your non-tax state or your tax state or what have you. Name your nice place to live with weather and whatever, but you make less. That evens it out. It's just not like that. You happen to have weather and the tax situation. So, of course, they're more attractive places. And it was inevitable that teams like Tampa and Florida were going to net and bring in talent, and they were going to make the teams that now you look, the last 5 Stanley Cups, look at what the teams that were there. They were going to catch up eventually. It was inevitable. It's the same thing like Dallas. It's the same thing with these other states that have no tax, Vegas and stuff. This is the attractiveness of them. They have the weather and they have no state tax. So of course players are going to flock there. You're against it in 2 capacities. And that's why it's kind of like an unfortunate situation. You have to bank on guys that are from here that want to come back here. And apparently a lot of them kind of don't for a whole bunch of other reasons I don't want to get into. But then any guy in free agency,
whoever the Montreal Canadiens draft, which is why they've always had to build with the draft, and through the draft, they tend to keep them. They tend to keep them. Or at least they put an effort to keep them. But for the most part, they keep them. You know, there's the occasional offer sheet that comes in and kind of messes things up in Kotkaniemi, which probably it's a dodged bullet, not in hindsight. But I mean, other than that, it's whoever they draft tends to stick around.
It just shows that the draft is that important. First off, bear in mind too, the real only thing the Habs have realistically, besides the new culture that they're building up, is the legacy of this team and the heritage of this team. This is the most like historic franchise in the entire sport. When you play hockey, unless if you're born and raised and did everything in Toronto or Boston, and you're like, nah, I hate the Habs. If you grew up playing hockey, this is a team you want to play for, man. No fan base is going to raise you higher. No fan base.
Yeah,
winning here is the greatest place to win in the planet.
Losing is just as bad.
That's fair too. But you don't think about losing. You think about, I imagine raising the Stanley Cup in Montreal. There'd be no greater high. I know they all say it and everybody else says it. And sure, I'm biased. But you know what? The hell with that. This is the greatest place to play hockey in the world. No fan base will make you could be a plug on this team and people will stop you in the streets and hoist you up in the air and you won't be able to do your groceries because you're going to have a lineup of fans who want to take your picture. This is the place. And that's what this team has to offer. You don't have the money. You have this vicious tax here. And hopefully there is some system that gets brought up someday in the future that can level the playing field. This team will never lose again. Everybody will want to come here. They'll get paid all the money. And it'll be great. But I also don't have a solution to this, unfortunately.
Greg, you see that speech you just did? That little speech? That should be a speech for your next video that you'll
make a video
for the opening night game.
That's it.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that's noted.
That brings us to the conclusion of this episode. Unless you boys have anything you want to add, any last little bits?
Good.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for listening and taking the time. I know we're in the middle of summer, so anybody who's still listening to a bunch of guys talk about Montreal Canadiens stuff in July, thank you so much. We love you. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to us, wherever that may be. If you haven't already, consider liking and subscribing. If you have, thank you so much. If you haven't, just a little button, little click. We appreciate it so much. And the inaugural episode of Greg joining us. So thanks so much for joining us, Greg. We're going to be seeing you around a lot more. Hopefully Dave makes his return on the next time we get together. And until then, keep your eyes out for Greg Video. And as always, this was Get Pucked.